Welcome to our 2014 fiscal year preliminary budget planning. My name is Maria Karstarfen. I'm the superintendent for the Austin Independent School District, and we're in the middle of a legislative session. There are a lot of things for us to think about as we've made plans for the upcoming school year and what that might mean in the out years. So we do have a strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan that we're following. It includes goals set by our school board, eliminating the achievement gap, ensuring that we're meeting and exceeding state standards, and that we're preparing our kids for college and life in a rapidly evolving economy. Part of our work, though, is complicated by our budget challenges, having to do a lot more with less. In that is basically the reality of what we were left with after the last legislative session, and that meant that AISD had a permanent cut of about $60 million in revenue, and it left us with a looming potential expectation of having to do more cuts. At the end of the day, under the current Senate Bill 1, if things were to stay exactly as they were from the last legislative session, by school year 2017-18, AISD would have to cut upwards of $150-ish million by the time we made it to that school year. So us having a multi-year plan under, what makes matters worse, a state funding formula where the weights are over 20 years old and don't account for inflation makes AISD, just like every other district in the state of Texas, very vulnerable to the things that are happening in our session. And then finally, as some of you may remember, over the last 3 years we've been under austerity planning, continuing to make cuts and eliminating programs based on program evaluations, trying to ensure that we are making budget cuts. But in those 3 years, you may remember that we also had to do a reduction in force to help us get ourselves teed up for the right approach in the out years. So our budget challenges and the growing needs around that budget also include the changes in our demographics. We have a lot of economic diversity that's necessitating changes in the way we do our programming and our strategic direction in our work. So some things have changed in AISD. For example, 1 in 3 students, English is not their first language. For 2 and 3, they live in poverty. 1 in 10 are special education students. And those demographics keep changing at a pretty rapid pace. We also, of course, are in one of the toughest states for state accountability, and those performance standards continue to increase when the resources are not increasing. So we also have that pressure at the forefront as well. And given some of the expectations, particularly under the new state assessment, where we are expected to do more interventions and accounting for how we help get students back on track, those interventions and those kinds of remediations are not paid for by the state. We have to find the resources to do that ourselves. Talent is a key piece. We can't do our job without our important teacher quality and principal quality and support staff quality that comes in a business where we are a business of people. So we're always competing for the best talent, and we want to ensure that our salaries are competitive in our region, where we are competing with districts like Eames, like Leander, like Round Rock, who are often able to provide more in salary and compensation than AISD. We also have increased competition, both from private schools and charter schools, and the more that families have choice, and that choice extends beyond AISD, making sure that we are able to keep our market share and keep attracting students into AISD is an essential part of us being able to continue to be a successful system. But if that increased competition actually has an impact on our enrollment, which then impacts the amount of dollars we might receive for average daily attendance or weighted average daily attendance, that will have an impact on AISD's revenue. So, as the superintendent and with our chief financial officer, Nicole Conley-Abram, we've been planning with the board with a multi-year approach. We started off with 3 years, and now we're into 5 years, and we really tried to coordinate our major budget effort with all the other support plans for the district, whether that's a technology plan, a library plan, a bond plan for capital improvements. All of these things bubble up into having some kind of M&O or operational cost to the district. So we have to manage manage that over time to ensure that we don't exceed our revenues and are not able to implement the things that are programmatically or capitally invested in by the taxpayers of Austin. A lot of our preliminary budget includes these kinds of conditions, but it also includes a lot of the programming and planning that we were doing in the district. For example, our annual academic and facility recommendations. Our academics drive those things that are support plans to the district, including the bond and the propositions in the bond. Those things are under consideration for the budget, even though we're not completely done with the legislative session. We're taking into account bills and things that might impact our budget and baking those things in. As a reminder, we will not have a final budget until the legislative session is over, and in addition to that, if they go beyond the end of our school year and into August, we'll have to make adjustments again, and the board will not take action on the final budget until the August timeframe.
And certainly is a pleasure to be before you to talk about some of the highlights that's in the preliminary FY 2014 preliminary budget that's currently before our Board of Trustees for contemplation and final adoption in August. Many of the details that I talk about tonight will be contained in sort of the FY 2004 budget primer that we've developed over the last 3 years. Some of you have the hard copy version tonight. It can also be found on the district's website. It's certainly a helpful tool to provide you with additional context and details to some of the things that I'll talk about this evening so that you can actively participate in the budget process. The preliminary budget represents the administration's sort of first or initial proposal, so be it, that will be modified over time. We will certainly can expect changes to some of the assumptions that we've made in the budget as it relates to both revenue and expenditure. We're still awaiting some of the final actions from the legislative sessions. While there are many proposals that are on the table that could affect AISD, certainly we wanted to take that into account before we finally adopt the budget in August. And then also tax values, which you'll see is a main driver in some of our revenue estimates, and so we won't be able to finalize our recommended budget until we get those certified values from our chief appraisers. So as we move throughout the budgeted process, which is iterative, we'll debate and reconcile and make adjustments. Again, we'll continually put up information on our website so that you can access and have an opportunity to attend scheduled board meetings as they contemplate the budget, as well as a budget hearing that's scheduled for August. So that being said, I want to sort of start off talking about the operating expenses that the district has worked with over the most recent years. Because despite the fact that our overall budget may be increasing, which includes both the food service, the debt service, and the general fund, the operating dollars that the district has available to support its daily functions has actually been on the decline in both FY11 and FY 2012, which is shown in this chart. The decline translates into less dollars per pupil. This chart shows about a 2% decline from 2009 to 2011. The most recent year expense data is available from TEA. And when you adjust it for inflation, the district will have basically absorbed a 5% reduction in the dollars per pupil it has to operate our campuses. Despite the inflationary costs for healthcare, electricity, fuel, the amount of state WADA that the district has received has remained relatively flat until most recent cuts where we experienced about an 8% decline. And those inflationary factors could cost the district anywhere from $8 to $15 million in any given year because of the substantial size of our workforce, coupled with some of the sharp increases that we've seen in both electricity and fuel. And so these cuts means that we have less staff. Dr. Karstafen talked about some of the austerity planning that we put into place over the last 3 years, which included a reduction in force in FY 2012 that eliminated 1,153 positions. So you can see in FY 12 where we saw a drop-off in our staff of about 5%, with some of it gradually coming back in the current year as we experience more availability of grant funding. So not only do we have less people, they have less support supporting them in the field to meet these higher expectations. I want to briefly talk about how some of the current legislative proposals could affect AISD. The current state budget proposals, while lucrative for some school districts, AISD will not see see substantial relief from some of the most aggressive proposals that are currently being contemplated. The current House version, which adds about $2.5 billion for public schools, AISD would probably only receive about $2.2 million or $28 per ADA, or average daily attendance, due to the state funding formulas, which is one of the we are amongst some of the lowest impacted districts as a result of some of these legislations, if not the lowest. While some districts will be fully restored and others may even experience up to 50% more on top of the restoration, AISD will not see a substantial release in these legislative proposals thus far. So we have not made those adjustments in our preliminary budget assumptions. In response to several lawsuit filings against the state for school funding, Judge John Dietz ruled that the Texas school finance system was unconstitutional. It was inequitable, not adequately funded, and had the effects of a statewide property tax, which essentially meant that it did not permit for meaningful discretion at the local level. While we expect this ruling to be appealed by the state at the federal level, it's speculative as to how these recent proposals at the legislature, which has put in about additional $2.5 billion into the system, for which has a proposal to increase $2.5 billion for public school spending, how it may affect the outcomes of those appeals at the federal court level, which tends to be a little bit more conservative. But even if the plaintiffs do prevail as a result of that appeal, we won't see any action that would affect our budget until a subsequent year. So our budget does not take into account any potential revenue associated with the lawsuits. And so now I want to talk about the details of the preliminary budget. It's just over $1 billion, which includes, again, the general fund, food, and debt service. The general fund represents the district's operating budget. The net change is about $39.2 million, primarily attributable to an anticipated increase in our recapture liability. About $7.3 million set aside for a 1.5% one-time salary adjustment for all employees, and about $4.3 million associated with anticipated increased healthcare costs, and about $3.8 million for other baseline costs and programming needs. The general fund represents about 73% of our overall funds, with recapture representing about 13% of our funds, as shown here in this graph. How many of you know what recapture is? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and say it just for the sake of those who may not be in the know. AISD is considered property wealthy under the state's recapture law, which requires the district to send some of the tax revenue that it generates from its M&O tax rate to the state for redistribution to property poor school districts across the state. And since FY 2002, AISD has sent to the state over $1.5 billion in recapture payments, all of which come from tax collections generated here in Austin locally. Unlike the M&O tax rate, tax revenue generated from our INS tax rate to support our bond programming is not subject to recapture, but the M&O portion is. Our projected general fund expenditures, net of recapture for FY14, are expected to increase about $15.5 million, or just over 2%, mainly for some of the increases that I've already talked about with regards to recapture, other baseline budgetary increases associated with some of the statutorily and required programming that needs to be put in place as a result of some of the higher accountability standards. We have funding proposed for school safety initiative and the expenditures associated with approved annual academic and facilities options and bond initiative programming. The district, while there is a revenue shortfall because our revenues are not meeting our projected expenses, the district will utilize its reserves to make up the shortfall of about $45.2 million, as essentially we project our revenue to actually decline by just over almost $2 million. So the school system is an enterprise that is highly dependent on, highly dependent on human capital, with over 11,500 plus employees, nearly $640 million in the FY 2014 budget, or nearly 87%, will be spent on payroll. Over 8%, or $62 million, will be spent on our contracts and purchase services. AISD continues to ensure that our funds are spent primarily to support students in schools. The vast majority of our budget, our general fund budget, 63% is allocated directly towards instruction. A significant portion, nearly 15%, is spent on maintenance and facilities. General administration represents just only 2.5% of the general fund budget. The net revenue to the district, again, is expected to decline almost by $2 million. While we project an overall increase in revenue, local revenue, as a result of increased tax collections, resulting from a projected appraisal value increase of just over 3%, AISD, unfortunately, is not able to retain this revenue as a result of the state funding formulas. There are only two ways that the district can increase its revenue, and that's either increase the number of students who are enrolled in the district and their daily attendance, which is our ADA, or increase its tax rate. We expect revenue projections, again, to change. The chief appraiser will certify our property values. She'll provide a preliminary value in April, and then subsequently, July 25th, by law, they have to provide the certified values, to which we will build our final budget revenue projections on and submit to the board for action. We expect our federal revenue to increase about $1.3 million as a result of some internal accounting adjustments that we're making to reimburse the general fund from our food service fund. The federal revenue represented in our general fund budget is not associated with any federal grants. It merely reflects indirect costs that we're able to assess for operating various federal grant programming, as well as our Medicaid reimbursement program. So again, when you look at how the budget is supported by revenue, we're about 84% local sources, 13% it represents our entitlement under our state aid system, and federal sources, meaning indirect costs and Medicaid, represent about 3% of our overall general fund revenue. We are proposing no change to the M&O tax rate at this time in the preliminary budget. We expect to maintain the second overall lowest tax rate across our regional counterparts, school district counterparts. Even with the proposed bond 3.5% increase, we expect to remain in that second place standing. Despite the popular belief, the district's tax rate has not grown substantially. In fact, the M&O tax rate is about 28% lower than it was in 2006. Prior to 2007, the M&O tax rate was $1.50 for 4 consecutive years. And then when HB 1 was put into place, that tax rate was compressed to about $1.33 in FY 2007. And then in FY 2008, we went to voters to ask for their approval to ratify a tax rate increase, to increase the tax rate to about just nearly 4 cents at 3.9 pennies. And so only until recently, in 2010, with the substantial property tax declines associated with the overall recession, did we have to increase our tax rate on the INS side to account for debt service costs associated with the 2004 and 2008 bonds, which the voters authorized during those respective years. The FY 2014 budget includes $35 million in overall expenditure increases. Again, nearly $24 million of it is associated with projected recapture payment requirements. There are various increases proposed to maintain continuity of services and maintaining health and electricity and fuel, as well as to support our AFRs as well as our bond initiatives. And again, page 21 and 22 of the budget primer that you have before you has the details of these proposed increases. To be successful in the future, we realize that we have to have a human capital strategy that allows the district to maintain the quality of its staff. If you look here, this chart shows that AISD teacher salaries rank 8th at about 10 districts surveyed in the local area, so that we know that it's an imminent need for us to maintain some competitiveness as we compete for the best and brightest in our classrooms. We've set aside about $7.3 million in the preliminary budget to provide an additional 1.5% increase for all of our employees. And we also assume that the board will take action to continue the one-time 3% increase that was put into place in the current fiscal year to address compensation, which had been frozen previously for 2 years. And so the preliminary budget proposal assumes that that will stay in place, as well as an incremental difference so that we can stay competitive with some of our regional counterparts, despite the fact that there's a pretty substantial disparity in our teacher salaries versus their teacher salaries. Lastly, even though we're in a more favorable position to be able to support our expenditure and operations through the use of our reserves, it's certainly not an ongoing solution or a permanent solution to support expenditures that are recurring in nature. Sufficient reserves are important and necessary to maintain our bond ratings, which ultimately affect taxpayers in the long run. We're one of a handful of school districts that has the highest ratings in Texas, which basically determines our overall credit worthiness and our borrowing costs. So using our reserves allows us to balance, which is different from being structurally balanced. So this simply means that at some point, we must make sure that our expenditures are matching our revenue as we plan future budgets. So we will probably need a multifaceted solution for the future to satisfy this shortfall, which would include both expenditure and revenue adjustments, which could include the possibility of a future TRE for the district. And then lastly, I just I included this slide to remind you of some of the budget milestones going forward. Primarily, I want to draw your attention to the August dates, which we will present on August 12th, the recommended budget to the board. We'll have a public hearing on the 27th, and the board will adopt the budget and the tax rate on August 27th. Certainly, at scheduled meetings during times between here and August, you're certainly invited to come and provide meaningful feedback to the board as they contemplate this budget proposal. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
All right, well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I guess I need to start off by saying Jeff Kaufman, our Director of Facilities or Construction Management, sends his apologies for not being able to come and present himself tonight, but he's out of state at a conference this week, and so I'm going to try and do my best to sub for him tonight. My name's Scott Rouse. I'm a project manager in the Department of Construction Management. I've been involved with the CBAC and the bond planning since early on, and I'll try and answer any questions when we get to that period later. All right. I'd like to start first, though, by any of you that aren't that new to the district or don't have some history or background with it, just to give you a little background on where we are, kind of how we got to where we are today. The Austin School District is the 5th largest school district in the state, 37th largest nationally. We have an enrollment of approximately 86,745 students. They're projecting that enrollment's going to increase 800 to 1,000 students a year coming up annually. We've got over 12 million square feet of actual building space spread out over 128 facilities throughout the district. In addition to that, we also have a little over 900,000 square feet in and portables that are spread out over 644 portables throughout the district. So I can give you some idea about the number of portables that we have on different sites. And with that, we'll get started with the presentation. First, AISD by state law cannot advocate for or against the bond, but I am here tonight to present the facts. And so hopefully this information you can take forward for the vote that will be held on May 11th. On the February board meeting by the Board of Trustees, they approved the order to have the election for the bonds on May 11th. We have early voting that starts on April 29th and runs through May 7th. So please get out and vote. As was mentioned earlier, the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee, it's a group that had been meeting over the last 9 to 10 months. Numerous community campus leaders getting together as a group to review individual campus plans developed by each campus. They had different departments that came in and presented on their behalf, whether it be food service, fine arts, athletics, and then also looked and compared a lot of the scope of work with our functional equity, which is our educational specifications. They looked at those schools that were inadequate as far as in order to provide the needed function for that specific instruction, and made recommendations to the Board of Trustees whether those spaces need to be enhanced or modified. And if you've seen any of the preliminary information that's out, you'll notice that the Board of Trustees has developed this bond, separating it into 4 separate propositions. This is a quick overview of all the propositions. Proposition 1, and I may need to, where I can read it. And I'll get into more detail as we get into further on the slides. Proposition 1 is the health, environmental, equipment, and technology, $140 million. Proposition 2 for $233 million includes a lot of safety and security and relief from overcrowding and new schools. Proposition 3, $349 million. Academic and building infrastructure renovations. This will get into the systemic repairs that you'll see later in the presentation. And then Proposition 4, academic incentives, fine arts, athletics for $168 million. On Proposition 1, for the $140 million, it's split up into separate categories. For food, we have food service at campus improvements. This is primarily for freezer cooler renovations and upgrades at a lot of the kitchens. Maintenance facility and equipment. We have technically, I guess, one main service center, maintenance service center that we have off of East 51st Street that services the entire district. I guess, again, back on the history, we cover 230 square miles, so it's a lot of traveling for the different building operators and maintenance personnel to get out to all the different campuses. So part of this is to upgrade some of their equipment and facilities on the current site, as well as look at the new South Bus facility location for a satellite office for a south facility, so the travel distance isn't so far. Transportation district-wide, I saw our transportation director in the back earlier. This is for new buses. Finally retire those buses that have met their life expectancy. Technology upgrades. We're going to try and get a lot of the Wi-Fi to all the portables. We're going to construct or build up our infrastructure for all the Wi-Fi and mobile devices that we're seeing now in a lot of our schools. And this will also replace a lot of the PA systems and generators that we have at the school. A lot of the high schools are what we call our supernodes. Supernodes have the main distribution closets, technology closets that distribute out to other middle schools and elementary schools in that zone. And if there was a power outage at the high school, it would shut down not only the other elementaries and middle schools, but all the schools in that zone. And so we have emergency generators at each of those locations to keep those systems up and running so they don't see any interruption in power or their services during the school day. And we do on occasion have glitches in the power or power outages that are needed by some means or another, so we want to make sure we don't interrupt any type of instruction on the campus. So this will replace or upgrade a lot of those generators that have been there for years that we want to make sure and have a good confidence that they're going to come on when they need to. Classroom science fixtures and equipment, pretty self-explanatory. We got a lot of schools that we didn't touch during the science classroom upgrades by the new state initiatives, the 4x4, where we're going to go back in and we're going to upgrade a lot of the laptops, a lot of the lab equipment that they have in the rooms to make sure they're up to current safety standards. And energy conservation district-wide, those of you that are, I guess, familiar with Bowie, you'll know that we installed a 55 kW solar system that's on the back of one of the classroom wings back over here to the south. Bowie was one of three other schools that received the same installation through a SECO grant, federal SECO grant that the district received. It hasn't been in place long enough to actually check the energy efficiencies or the consumption that we've saved during that year, although it is a learning tool that the campuses have used in their science classrooms, where they have online monitoring that the classes can go during the day and look at the different power production that the solar system's putting out. This initiative that we have in the bond could expand the systems that are currently in place as well as replicate those systems on other campuses. We're currently looking at if the bond does pass, we have 2 schools. That's one under construction and the last elementary school that's in the final design stages that we're looking at incorporating solar on those schools if we have the available funds. Proposition 2, this is our safety and security district-wide, obviously with the news lately, what's happening around the country. There's been a focus on making sure a lot of our schools are safe. We're going back into schools that don't have, like some of the newer schools, the safety vestibules that you have when you enter the school to make sure it directs you into the administration office, just so you don't go directly back into the hallways of the campus. We're going to try and include those vestibules as well as upgrade a lot of our security cameras, add additional security cameras where they're lacking. Typically, our cameras have been in place, obviously, to catch mischief on campus, but also intrusion into the campus, and that's typically needed on a ground floor level. We didn't concentrate too much on a second floor level for obvious reasons, if they weren't coming in off the roof. But due to recent events, if someone were to get into the building and we were trying to find them, if they were to get upstairs, we wouldn't have the means to, I guess, put a camera on them. So this also includes on our 2-story facilities, adding cameras on that second floor so we can monitor or try and track anyone that's in the building that we're looking for. Additions based on demographics. We have 5 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. We've got 3 new elementary schools that's being planned. This is actually a reduction from what the CBAC originally presented to the Board of Trustees. Based on the demographic survey that they performed back in January, they determined that maybe that 4th one wasn't needed, and so they scaled it back to just 3. I believe the actual location or determination where those schools will go at this time will be based on population and demographics, and is just being planned for future growth. Land acquisition for the schools, New South High School feasibility design only. Most of you may recall that we have money in the previous bond for the new high school site. During a lot of discussion with the CBAC, they determined that, you know, if they were to include the money for that high school in this bond, that it may, I think, scare away a lot of you because of the size of what the bond would be. And so they felt at this point it would be good to perform some feasibility studies. At that time, we were kicking around 8 different type of programs that this high school could or could not be. And so they've got money in there for that feasibility to kind of look into it a little further, perform some studies, and determine what exactly type of facility they want to build eventually. Functional equity additions, this ties back to our educational specifications. When we compare campuses to their current ed spec, obviously we have old schools that won't meet ed spec just because our ed specs are based on new construction when we construct a new school. However, they still have instruction that they have to provide, and if we find out that there were situations that they could not provide instruction due to, could be casework, sinks, whatever it is in the classroom that they would need to provide that instruction, or the actual size of the room for the occupants or participants that they have in a particular instruction, that we needed to do some expansion or modification to make sure that they could meet it. And so this includes those additions. Individual campus plan request, you'll see this also come in the next proposition. We have campuses that have specific programs that they require special needs as far as provisions in the classroom for the instruction. This isn't something really tied back to EdSpec. It may be based on the demographics and attendance that they have at that school. And so this is going to help address some of those concerns they have of trying to provide that instruction. Fine Arts at Ann Richards, this is primarily, although Ann Richards is getting, this isn't all that Ann Richards is getting, but the bulk of this for the Fine Arts would be for a 500-seat auditorium that they'll be getting on their campus. Also have Fine Arts additions and renovations at Lamar Middle School. Of course, through this last bond, we constructed the new Performing Arts Center at McCallum. Lamar is the feeder for McCallum and have a real strong fine arts program, and so we felt it was, they were due, I guess, basically accommodations on their campus that could provide the instruction that they needed as they moved up, or those students moved up into the programs into McCallum. We have a replacement expansion of gym at Anderson High School, as well as a multipurpose gym addition at Go Valley, also as part of this proposition. Proposition 3, facility systemic repairs. This is kind of the biggie here. What we've got is a facility condition assessment that our maintenance service center kind of maintains. Basically, when they get a work order in, on the database, they log in all the information about either components that are, I guess, going beyond their useful life. A lot of times on a campus this side, it would be door hardware. They have difficulty in securing doors maybe in the evening. And so just due to time and, of course, abuse from the students in and out, it's time to replace that door hardware. A lot of times they can go back to their work orders and look at those schools that have those repetitive work orders that keep coming in and decide that, well, we're spending a lot of money sending maintenance workers out. We really need to replace or upgrade. So it can go as small as door hardware up to mechanical equipment that's beyond its useful life to roofs that are beyond their warranty and useful life that need replacement. So this is basically your house, living in it requires maintenance, upgrades, repairs over time. The longer you're in it, just due to wear or time. And so this is going back, looking across the district in total and providing those upgrades. Individual campus plans. This is what you saw earlier in Proposition 2. This is one where we get into a little bit more detail as far as could involve some expansions or renovations to interiors to really modify or situate those spaces for those programs permanently in those schools. Libraries at on campus improvements. This is from our head of our library services to come back into those campuses that were due to size. Maybe they didn't have the stack area that they needed to accommodate all the books that they were getting. We're also moving into e-readers where they need space, as well as what we call CALs, the computers on wheels. A lot of times the instructors don't like those or maybe not have room inside their classroom to store those carts with computers, and so going back the way of the old AV storage rooms, you don't see the overhead projectors and those type of things anymore, and so they've moved into the library and started storing or kind of found a home which has really kind of squeezed the library, even though a lot of things are going electronic. So we have a lot of library upgrades to kind of bring us up into the 21st century. Proposition 4, we got career and technology for new programs. This is, again, was a big discussion item with the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee. We talked about individual campuses to north and south, or finding a facility that we could renovate. What we ended up doing is partnering with different programs. We've got an engineering program with ACC that they're going to partner with on the engineering side on program. UT Medical School, we're going to partner with them on the nursing side to kind of bring in a program with UT. We also have facilities such as Crockett, Lanier that have, well, Crockett has the auto shop. a cosmetology program over there. They're wanting to get more. It's kind of, if you've ever been over to the campuses and seen the programs, aside for Crockett Automotive, they're kind of embedded in the campus. Obviously, they didn't build a school for cosmetology, and so it's kind of embedded. They kind of wanted to bring it out more as a front and make it as far as something that the public could visit and utilize, and it would be great practice for the participants that are in the program. And so it's going to those campuses and enhancing the programs a little bit more. So we're trying to get more student participation and enrollment. School for Young Men. I skipped the special education facility. This addresses Rosedale and the Clifton Center. Clifton Center is up north, just north side of Nelson Field. It's a kind of a career school for kids that have learning disabilities but can still earn a trade. If you go up there, they've got great plant sales. They bake great cookies. It's just a great group of kids up there, but they've obviously have lacked any improvements in a while over on their campus, and so we're trying to do that. Over at the Rosedale School, this is one, I want to say off of Burnett Road or Lamar. I get my Lamar and Burnett's mixed up. But this is a school for the severely handicapped kids, and if it's a school that you've been by again, you'll know that that school, when it was built, obviously wasn't for the purpose of the occupants that they have in the school. There are a lot of needed upgrades on the campus, but they do extremely well, actually, if you were to visit, for the conditions that they have. But this is a facility that has really been lacking, overlooked, I believe, in the last few bond programs for some real needed improvements, and so the majority of that is going to those programs. Did I skip one? Oh, then the School for the Young Men, another topic of discussion for the CBAC. Right now we're looking at the ALC Ridgeview renovation, the old Anderson High School campus for renovations there, and basically it would bring a men's school comparable to what we have at the Ann Richards or the women's school. So as far as what this is going to cost, right now, if you're in a average home value of $200,000, you're looking at about, I believe, $70 a year increase in your taxes. Taxes are actually going to increase incrementally over the next 3 years, but will max out at 3.5 cents. And if you'll look back at some of the previous bond programs, it's as far as value for the dollar, it's comparable or better than what we've done before. One of the primary items, I guess, on this slide I'd like to point out is the 100% of the bond funds stay in AISD and not subject to recapture, which, if you're listening to Nicole's explanation on recapture earlier, basically it stays here and we don't send that money out. So it all gets spent here in the Austin community. Again, Election Day is on May 11th. I ask that you get out and either vote early or vote on May 11th. We have some contact information, aisd.org/bond. If you'd like to go online, there's a lot of really good information. A lot of it's in the packet that you have, a nice little interactive map if you have school-specific questions or information you'd like to know about what's happening. I was also given today, hot off the press, the new bond book for this year. Went with a nice aqua color, if you've seen the ones in the past. This book will be at the campus, at each individual campus soon, or at the administration building that you can pick up and look for the place card signs that are going to be out, the little small billboards that will be out in front of your schools. That's also going to list the individual scope of work for that campus. And if all else fails, you can always dial 414-BOND and you can talk to someone. You can leave messages, ask questions, or also send an email and we'll try and get a response. And that's it. Anybody have any questions?
I have a question. It's about the bond math. I went online and looked at all the information the ASD published on their website, including all the 128 scope of work documents. And I added up all of those, and then I added up the new facilities. There is 3 new schools and land acquisition and the new South High School feasibility and design money. And I'm still short about $125 million to come up with a total. So I would like to know how all the information that is published, itemized, adds up to the total of the bond, because I can make it add up.
Did you check the numbers against like the information that was passed out tonight?
Well, I didn't do all the 128 numbers tonight, but I did it at home the other night, and those add up to 654 million only. And the three new schools in land and high school design add up to about 112 million. So that doesn't add up to 892. I am missing 125 million.
Sure.
Great. So what I'm going to ask him to do is to come and sit down with you and look at the numbers and the materials that you have so that we can do a verification. But we have, vetted the numbers multiple times, so I'm not sure how you did your numbers.
I am only using the information that is published on the ASD website. If there is information that is missing from there, perhaps it needs to be added, but I can tell from what is published.
And what I'm saying is I don't know how you added your numbers together. I need him to sit down and look at that, and then we're happy to verify. But we have done our numbers multiple times by multiple committees and our PAC for the bond. So unless we understand what you took off the website to put in for the numbers, we will not be able to get to the bottom of it. So could you do that?
Sure.
Just kind of now? Mm-hmm. And by the way, we do have a note taker who's taking down questions and information. So from this meeting, the questions that were asked, we will verify and re-communicate the answers to people.
Moderator. Ah. Is it on? Okay. I guess this is probably for Ms. Conley. Currently, there's $79 million in repair budget. And I guess you alluded to this. As a homeowner, I would fix this. Well, there are things, Laura and I spent a lot of time this weekend looking over this. I don't support this bond. I think there's a lot of waste in it. And I think you all are not respecting the citizens of Austin, asking us to fund things that should be fixed right now. We found 63 reasonable repairs. There's a bathroom mirror you all are asking a loan for. You all are asking for water faucets. You're asking for Home Depot runs that each school, if we divided the millions of dollars in this current budget, the school budget for this year, each facility, there are 128 facilities, have $617,000 to spend. Why can't you go to Home Depot and get a door replacement and fix it? I don't get a loan when I have a simple repair. And these the roof leaks that are going on, if you let them go, then yeah, you do need a bond because you need to do mold repair and everything else. I just don't get why. Let me ask, what is the current balance? What is the current balance of the maintenance fund right now?
You're talking about year-to-date, at this point in time, how much has been expended?
You should know at the end of each month how much you have. I know how much I have.
I
don't
have it by specific on the maintenance budget. I mean, we have a $1 billion budget, and we have over 80 different cost centers and almost 112 different object codes. And so I would have to follow up to get you the current balance as it is today, as we post expenditures almost daily. Okay. So I will get your contact information, and I'll get you the budget and the current year-to-date actuals and the variance. But when we benchmark what we spend on maintenance and operations on a per-student basis as well as per square footage, considering the infrastructure that we have, we are relatively, if not in line, but we're lower than what those benchmarks say in terms of what we should be investing for maintenance for our entire infrastructure. And when you look at that budget, it includes maintenance, housekeeping, all of the custodial components to support all of the facilities, not just the school components within the district's infrastructure.
I just think having ordered microwaves at Anderson High School, it took 3.5 months to get something that I could have brought in the next day. They were double what I could have paid for. And if this is how you all are using my money as a taxpayer, I'm not supporting this, nor am I encouraging anybody in this room to support it. You all are wasteful, and I think it's wrong to do this to the public. So I do want to know where the maintenance budget stands at this point.
Is there a schedule for the purchase of the property for the new South Austin High School? The money that was set aside in the 2008 bond for purchase of the property.
Right, so we have a process. We do have a process that's articulated in our facility master planning framework that explains step by step how we go about the the purchase of the land, and then after we finish the land, there will be a second schedule for what we do around construction. But as it stands today, as we worked with our board and worked through how we wanted to go about the land purchase, we were directed to have a conversation with the community about what type of academic programming we were interested in as a school community, including, of course, the people of South Austin, what they felt like their needs and the interest of the school might shape up to be, which are things that we take in consideration before we go out to purchase a piece of property. We are in the middle of those conversations. We've had several by now. We know that they're wrapping up their work. I think the last time they had a recent meeting, I think they told me in the late May to early June timeframe, they're going to be prepared as a subcommittee to bring something back to the board for us to be able to discuss the academic expectations and hopes of whatever the new program and design would be. And then from there, that drives the type of property that we would buy. We don't want to overbuy, we don't want to underbuy, we don't want to locate it in the wrong direction or place. We want to ensure that whatever the academic design is aligned to the type of property that we would purchase. So, and that timeline then gets driven by the market by and large. When I started here, we were still looking for properties in North Central. South Austin is also a tough, a tough environment with all the growth. And in some areas, we're completely maxed out. So North Central Austin was a tough one to do. Took us a couple of years to get that settled. But once we figure out the academic programming, that will drive the type of property. And that has a process in and of itself as well. So I expect to hear our next big benchmark is before we close out the end of this school year from the committee that's working on the South High School. And then from there, the board will go into executive session to then talk about those things that are appropriate about how we move forward on the land purchase.
Okay, my other question is, so I found on the website the detailed breakout for Bowie High School, but it doesn't show which of these items fall under which proposition. Is there a piece of information somewhere where it says, which items fall under which prop?
Yes, well, first we have a far more detailed line items in a bigger spreadsheet that is on the website that we've been using for planning. What I don't know, and I do have to ask you specifically, do we have where we take a school then we crosswalk it with each prop? Okay, and where can we find that?
You can check with Mr. Cole. Yes, we got one in our office posted on the wall that you can take the school and call.
So, okay, so what it sounds like is we have the information and it just might be about making it public friendly and putting that out there. But can we write that down, Beverly, as a question on how we can get the crosswalk of the proposition up on the crosswalk of the propositions for each school so that people know where it is. And it is true, it is all over. So, there's stuff from McCallum I saw in Prop 4. And then you have the individual schools, which is in, can somebody go backwards for me on the slides? Who has the control of the clicker? Can you go back to Prop 4? Keep going. Okay, so in that individual campus plans, that is the bulk of the dollars that goes school by school. And then we have categories where things fall because their safety and security is like the focus of the first one. This one, which happens to be Prop 3, is very specific about systemic repairs that go across all schools, individual campus plans, that's each individual school that is very unique to their plan. Library improvements, again, that's going to cover just about every school and AISD. When you go to, for example, the next slide, right? So in physical education and athletics district-wide, every single school will have something in athletics. It'll also be the same way for fine arts, and then there's more specific programming almost, exclusively at the secondary level around career and technical education. So you're right, sir, that it will be coming out of a lot of different propositions, but we do have, when we can crosswalk that for the public. And if we already have it, we probably just need to make it public friendly.
So you just need to put it on the website?
Yeah. And then we'll post it on the website if it's not already there under some other, description.
Thanks.
Hello. My question is how the items were put into the bond package. I did an open records request to find out what the principals from each school requested out of the bond package. And AISD did release that, and they posted it on the website. I will add, they did not post the principal's school request under the bond icon. They posted it under construction management. So if anybody wants to find it, it's kind of buried deep in the AISD website. But my question is, why were some of the principal's requests not addressed in the bond package? And why was the bond package including more, in some instances, than the principals even asked for? For example, Mills Elementary, the bond has on there to get some additional classrooms. Well, the principal didn't request it, and Mills is prevented by impervious coverage from any more expansion. So it seems like there was some sort of a cross-communication with what the principals were asking versus what was put into the bond package. And I would address it, if anyone's interested in looking where the principals submitted their school request, it's under the AISD under construction management, which if you go to the archive section, and then it will be titled School Request for the Proposed 2013 Bond Program. So can you explain how the principals were or were not addressed in their requests?
So our principals, along with their campus advisory councils and other school, community stakeholders for that particular school, yes, they were given a framework for all the kinds of questions we needed them to answer about their facility. We even walked the school with the they're not called, the head engineer for the school and the principal, and if they wanted to, they could bring a CAC member or something of that sort, but with our facility people to understand what they put in their plan. And fair enough, there are some people who asked for less, and the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee, who've been working on this for over a year, we did a Capital Improvement and Bond Advisory Committee to help us tee up whether or not we should even trigger the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee to consider working on a bond. But all of that together, by the time we get to May, will be over a year's worth of work. And the reason why they took the time to do all those things is while a principal, yes, we listen to them and the community members that walk through there, but when you start bringing in the head engineer and you start bringing in the facility people and you start talking about equitable funding in schools, while they are all doing their jobs, they are not experts in this area. So I don't believe for a second that they may or may not know exactly how much infrastructure needs to go into the plumbing, needs to go into the electrical wiring, or even technology necessarily, because some of our people, while some principals are great and know that to a T, others are brand new to the job, or others are, this is not their area of expertise. So we bring in another round for people to look at all of the conditions, the adequacy conditions of a school. That even goes so far as you are a school that we need to really look at your cafeteria, and because of the numbers of kids in your school, we're going to need to blow that out or do additions to your school. And yes, there are schools that do have impervious cover, but that does not mean that we, in working with the city, necessarily means they cannot get additions or not get portables that allows for them to accommodate the numbers of students that they have. So the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee raises a lot of questions, and we go back and look at those things with architects, with engineers, and then come back and say, while their request may have been X, we might have needed to increase that because they didn't necessarily address projected growth or pick anything else like needs for the cafeteria or library or their roof. But we go in and double check those things. And it's not to just, blow up the budget or create some kind of glut. It is to actually do adequacy and equity within the district. And sometimes you can get principals that can nail it on the spot on exactly what's needed, and others who, project too low, and others that project too high. Also, we had a couple of things happening, like I'm going to pick libraries, where our department, we have a department that focuses on nothing but libraries, and they did an assessment, and we look at that on each individual school and what they saw district-wide. And then we compare that to what the school asked for, but where it was particularly unique to, which is in the, I think, proposition number 3, when they go specifically to, are we going to move that slide? Yeah. To library campus improvements, we went back and crosswalked that. So we might have pulled something out of a school plan so that we could put it in the district-wide campus improvements. It's still earmarked for that school, but it doesn't necessarily go on the individualized campus plan. Because we're making district-wide equity and adequacy decisions about what each school must have regardless of the leadership of the principal. So there was a lot of crosswalking and triangulation, and an entire Citizens Bond Advisory Committee made up of people from all over this district, appointed in part by our school board who are elected by the people, and other staff from AISD that came together, like I said, for over a year when you add the other advisory committees, so that we could really be thoughtful about the propositions and what needed to happen and where it needed to fall in the proposition work. But I'm not, there are many schools where we did make adjustments in the amounts because of those issues that I raised.
Hi, this is not a numbers question. You referred to equity across the schools, which I think is a very good goal. And one of the bond propositions here is the creation of a new high school, the School for Young Men, who the people of the community don't want. The majority of the people in that community don't want. How do you think it's equitable to put this to the vote of the rest of Austin? Like, I don't live in East Austin, I live in Northwest Austin, and I feel bad going to the polls and voting for something that the community doesn't want. Why couldn't this have been resolved with the community and have the support of the community? Thank you.
The question that was raised in the equity conversation is, how could you have a school for young women and not have a school for young men? That is the equity question that people did put in front of the district. And even though people may or may not support it, and that is what we think is fair. If you want to make a decision about whether or not equity should be defined as, if you have one for girls, you need one for boys, right? Or do you want to define it as, it's more equitable if we don't have one because the people don't want it, then go vote. We're bringing it to the public. You decide. We didn't call it. If it was a 50-50 split and the public isn't sure, some people want it and some don't, if we had not put it in a proposition, there are people who did come to us and say, how could you have this designed just for girls, an Ann Richards school for girls, and not offer it for men, young men in our district? Absolutely. It's a school of choice, just like Ann Richards.
Which school will it, if they don't want to go to single-sex school in that community, which school is it that they would go to?
They can go, in AISD, you can go to your home school, you can apply for a transfer to go to a different school.
I understand, but their home school, which one would be their home school?
The home school they have today.
And that's
do you know what a magnet school is?
A what school?
A magnet school?
Yeah, I know what a magnet school. I thought this school was going to replace one of theirs. It's not?
No, the building that we are recommending that we put the school for young men in is an underutilized, incredibly expensive building to run because it has not had renovations and updates. It is not up to the standards of state requirements. And if we were to ever use it as a comprehensive school, right now It's half closed off. Right now, we use it partially for a discipline alternative education program. It's not fully used, and it has not been kept up to standards. So it's either we need to use the capacity that we have to renovate the building is far less than building a new building for any kind of program like this. This would be a secondary school, 6th through 12th grade. When you're building a middle school or high school, it can range for middle school anywhere from $60 million, and a high school, like a South High School here in South Austin, would be upwards of $100 million. What we're proposing in here is to renovate an existing building that's underutilized and under quality standards to meet instructional purposes for the state of Texas is a $20 million proposition, and possibly less, because we have a private partner who is already starting to fund the programming. They've already given us $4.7 million, and we've already put in a proposal to help us offset the capital costs that are in the bond. So at the end of the day, it could be less than $20 million, but that is a third of what it would cost to do a middle school, a fifth of what it would cost to do a high school. And if you really want to talk about equity, we've got to ask ourselves in Austin, how can you have a girls' school and not a boys' school? And our data is showing that. We have plenty of highly challenged but highly capable students who might be served better in an environment like this that's focused on them, and also designed it as a school of choice. And that is what has been designed, and that's the proposal. But instead of deciding to go with one group or the other group, which may or may not be split 50-50, you put it to the voters, and if people want it, they'll vote yes. If they don't want it, they will vote no. And in that proposition, could you go to that proposition for me for number 4? This is where we put all of the things that we're calling academic initiatives, and those key initiatives like fine arts and athletics that really support academics. And our data is showing, our data clearly shows, we worked with the Kennedy Center on Fine Arts. We used Northside ISD as the model. Is that the one outside of Dallas? For athletics, to model and do our data analysis. Data shows that when our students are involved in fine arts, rich fine arts experiences, and consistent and rich athletic experiences for 3 consecutive years, the graduation rate difference is upwards of 20 percentage points. And that's looking at both children in poverty, where it's a little lower, but when we look at kids district-wide, it is one of the strongest things we could be doing if we want to increase graduation rates. And that is, so it wasn't like we were saying, let's just add more to fine arts, or let's add more to athletics, or let's just create another, school. We have either academics or, in this case, values or the issue of equity, things that our board has cited in the strategic plan as things that we must monitor and keep up with. And that is in large part the driver for how we got to some of these propositions. If you look at the values in the strategic plan, these propositions almost match one-to-one. Safety and security and health were one of the first things out of the box. Prop 1, that's what that's all about. Equity is listed as a value by our board in our strategic plan. This is how you get at equity. And while people may decide philosophically they don't agree with that, then they will likely not support this proposition. But if you really want to serve all kids and serve them at a high quality level and bridge that gap, whether it's the digital divide or the achievement gap or something around equity like gender, or in the case of athletics and other fine arts, never really investing in them, then you will actually support this proposition based on those facts. But we did turn it over to the people of Austin and said, you decide, because it's your vote. And our job is to give you the facts about the district, and you can make that decision on your own.
Good evening, Dr. Costarfin. My name is Alberto Gonzalez. I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same issue here, and you've addressed the School for Young Men, of course, in a wonderful fashion. The School for Young Men, as discussed and described by Dr. Costarfin, and ma'am, forgive me if I'm misunderstanding you, this is the School for Young Men proposed by the Moody Foundation. This is not the single-gender campuses that have been proposed and approved for District 1. That's a separate and different conversation. The School for Young Men that we're referring to here that she described is in reference to the School for Young Men as proposed by the Moody Foundation to serve as a companion campus, as she described, to the Ann Richards School. I served on a subcommittee that did some research on the School for Young Men as proposed by the Moody Foundation, and that's what we're referring to here, not the single-gender campuses that were proposed for District 1, the boys' school, and the girls' school. And we did talk about it, and we did look at it in terms of an equal opportunity for our boys in AISD. I visited the Ann Richards School as well. Those girls are receiving a top-notch experience and education here in Austin. They've been visited by female astronauts. They've been visited by a former female Supreme Court justice. There's a number of opportunities there for our girls, all girls across Austin, who are receiving a great benefit with that educational experience. As proposed by the Moody Foundation, we are asking support for that facility so that we can provide our boys here in Austin, all types of boys across Austin, with the same unique, valuable educational experience. And I just want to be sure that we're talking about the School for Young Men from the Moody Foundation and not the single-gender campuses that were proposed for East Austin. And you're right, there was division about those campuses. Thank you. Oh, okay.
So what I just described, which, just to be clear, AISD, in our conversations about our school community, made a proposal to many different people, doesn't matter which ones, but many different people, about helping us do an academic program that addressed the issue of equity and opportunity for a school for young men, which is in our bond. It is in a facility that is not up to instructional standards. That's where we're proposing it. And, you know, should this proposition not be successful, we would still propose it. We have to find another place to do it or delay the implementation. But the point is, this is the one that's in the bond. Yeah, there's a whole different model that is not in the bond, that is paid for 2 existing middle schools and is not included in cost for this. Its costs are not part of this. We're using existing schools like we do when we change any other academic programming.
Just kind of a general facilities question. Based on all of the additions and even the new campuses that are proposed under the bond, once they're all built out, you know, we're also seeing student increases along the same time frame. At the end of all that construction, are we anticipating that we would just be keeping up, or would we be able to reduce some of the portables? Would we, kind of, how would that all shake out at the end of all the construction?
Right, so part of what we are, that we absolutely are committed to do as a district, the board voted on a resolution that while we have like a 10-year timeline, that we actually do need a facility master plan. The expectation is that it is completely laid out to the best of our ability. It needs to address things like, yes, portables, transfers, any other policy things that we do. It'll also include things like boundaries and other issues that everyone knows is a big part of our facility planning, and how we would spend out in more detail the $892,240,000 that are inside of this bond. So I would say like the big master plan for how it all ends is still for the people of Austin to work with us to put in priority and order. Some things will be main drivers, like in a community where we have gross over-enrollment and lots of pressures on buildings built for 500 kids but have 800 kids in them. We'll clearly get priority, and we already have some, you know, like step-by-steps that have to happen immediately. But what we still need to carefully monitor and manage is actually the enrollment and the demographics of what's happening in our region and in this city. So for example, we're still growing as a city. For all the students we have and all the seats we have in AISD, we are going to be short, right? But here's the challenge. What is so, you know, where I'm so sympathetic when people are like, well, why this and not that, and how can we have extra seats here, but schools are filled over there? You can't take a high school senior and fill a seat in a kindergarten classroom. and get those kinds of balances. It doesn't work that way. We can't just mix kids up based on grade level, and we also can't put kids on buses from South Austin and try to send them up to North Austin and spend 3 hours in a school bus every day or more. So what we are trying to monitor, which is often driven by the housing patterns of Austin, is tracking and keeping up with where people circulate and live around this city and build and adjust as we're doing that. It is an incredibly controversial conversation. There are many things that we could be doing. Do we have the public or the political will to do it? Maybe, maybe not. But the careful balance that we need to do and how it all ends up is largely dependent on people like people like you and everyone else in this room to come together and agree on. We know that we'll have growth as a city. How much of our market share are we going to be able to keep? Is there a larger growth in families with no kids in certain areas, and therefore we need to focus our new schools and our new buildings in other places? You'll see in this bond that those schools are actually undesignated. In this bond, unlike other bonds, we've asked for a little more flexibility so that we can flex with the demographics of this city. Austin is growing leaps and bounds. We know that this region of Texas is particularly healthy in attracting new populations, all types, from retirees to college students and everybody in between, with families, with kids and without kids. And so that planning, that facility master plan, is really going to have to be our focus for this, this upcoming school year. And putting it in priority based on the needs of the community in order are some things that we're going to have to negotiate with Austin, in large part because, as Nicole said in the earlier presentation, and why we did it first, which is the budget, we won't be able to afford everything at the same time. So, I want you to know that it's not like the bond happens and we tax people in Austin out of the box on $892+ million. We borrow as we need it, and we should borrow it and use it based on a plan. And it won't happen all at once. It would be spread out over several years before we would get to the full load of that bond. And then we cannot, and one of the things that we agreed to in the resolution, and also with our business community, is that we would not build anything that we could not afford in our budget. We cannot be like one of the surrounding school districts. I can't remember which one. It may have been, was it Leander? That built a school. Come the new school year, they can't open it because they don't have an operating budget. They can't afford it. And so these are things where Austin, we do not want to be. And we could easily end up there without a significant plan and really, getting to the bottom of that question, how is this all going to end up? And doing it at a pace and a clip where your question about when are we buying land and when would a particular school be built already be laid out, and people know when it's coming and they can expect it, and taxpayers can plan their lives and the pressures on their budgets in a responsible way. But we still have, if the bond passes in all 4 propositions or even just one, we still owe it to our school community to have those kinds of details so that there are no surprises along the way and that we are working in the most transparent way possible. And that's not something AISD has done in the past.
Hi there. I'm Casey Winmus. I was a member of the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee. I'm also the legislative chair for the Austin Council of PTAs. The Austin Council of PTAs did adopt a resolution in support of this bond. However, tonight I'm not speaking on behalf of those organizations. I'm speaking as a parent and an advocate for children. I'm sure earlier in the presentation it was presented to you that 2 out of every 3 students in our school district are economically disadvantaged. You might also be surprised to hear that in the last 10 years, youth poverty in Central Texas has grown 107%. You might also be surprised to hear that out of all of our campuses, over 120, 1 in every 3 of our campuses has a student population that's 90% economically disadvantaged or higher. So that is a long way to get me to my budget questions. Is it my correct understanding from the budget presentation that 87% of our $694 million proposed budget for next year is personnel?
Yes.
Okay. So the total budget is $694 million. Just keep that in your mind. Dr. Karstarfin, what was the amount of funding cut from our school district during the 2011 legislative session?
Can I call a friend?
I know you know.
It's $60 million or 8% of our budget, especially after recapture, which left us $710 million to be able to use.
I really have a point, I promise. And you might have seen in the newspaper.
Trying to embarrass me with questions that I probably
I knew you knew the answer.
Not going to be able to answer after the next one.
You might have seen in the news that the legislature is talking about possibly restoring some of the funding to public education. Dr. Karstarfin, what's the estimated amount of funding we would possibly see restored from the amount that was cut? You know?
Per pupil, it was
total. So if we lost $60 million, what? Nicole?
I got $2.2 million.
Okay. So
I was doing the math. I was like $12, and then it went up to 28, and then there's 8. Okay, $2.2 million.
Okay, so
which is clearly not going to fill that hole.
So basically, our cuts will not be restored. Some school districts, I understand, get funding from the state to help with their facilities. Does Austin ISD receive any funding from the state?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Would you agree with the statement that this bond represents a significant and meaningful way?
Am I at the, is it like, is somebody doing this like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, so I can?
I'll find a prize for you.
Okay.
This is important. I just want everybody to hear this. Would you agree with the statement that this bond represents a significant and meaningful way we can improve learning conditions for every child in this school district?
Absolutely.
Thank you. You're done.
Thank you.
Dr. Christoph, over here.
Oh, yes, hi.
Hi, Bob Whitmire.
Nice to see you.
In 2008, we approved $32 million for purchase of land for South Austin High School. It's 2013, that was over 5 years ago. Seems to me that there's a little credibility problem here with the district. We approved that money 5 years ago. Obviously, you didn't need it. What gives us any assurance that you really need this money if you clearly didn't need that money?
Well, depending on who you talk to in South Austin, and there are many people that I talk to, they really would tell you that not only do we need that money, but we need to prepare for another secondary high school in South Austin somehow, some way.
Well, we have the money. It was approved 5 years ago. Where's my land?
Well, I mean, first, I mean, First, I will say that a lot of our challenge, which is something that we've talked about, is as far as having a clear process for how all these things were going to work, whether it was the 2004 bond or the 2008 bond. And I wasn't here during all this stuff, but when I got here and I saw how long sometimes it took for us to get to a purchase of land, it's not just the South Austin piece. We had North Central where we needed 2 lots of land, and that wasn't completed yet, and also the Performing Arts Center did not have its land. Now, what I will say is we have accelerated that process. All of those things have land now, and the one that we're working on, and our board's direction to us was work on academic planning first. What are we trying to build before we go buy land, and we didn't buy the right kind of land or the right kind of design for what we're trying to do academically. But I can say, at least under my administration, with the board that I've been working on, I don't know what AISD was really doing before, we have that process, we've articulated that process, and we've had a team of people, many people from right here in South Austin, working on us solidifying the academic direction so we can figure out what kind of land we're going to buy. Also, as far as the land is concerned, Austin is not an easy place to buy land. I'm not kidding. I think I looked at maybe 40 different concepts around land for that Performing Arts Center, and then we had to do it twice for every time that we had a trustee that asked a question. We had to go back and revisit these things again. So it takes a lot to negotiate what the land is, how much we can really afford, what do we anticipate, and when the rollout will be. But I know now, and I think, whether I can't judge what people were doing before, but we are far closer to being to the end of that process than we ever were. And if you really know South Austin, you know Bowie's filled to the gills. We know that we have impervious cover down here. Finding a place and getting those kinds of things sorted out and making sure that we're dealing with relief for Aikens as well has to be carefully done. And I'm gonna say it now because it's something that's very significant about what we choose to do and not do in AISD. We cannot do this process without also talking about boundaries first. So what do we need to do around boundaries to do some of the shifting and the relief, and then really plan for the growth that we anticipate for the future. But I do think AISD is on that track. In this bond, beyond the land, we have the money set aside for the, what is the word? The planning, what's it called? The feasibility for the site and things of that sort as well. And then what I would anticipate is by the time we finish figuring out the programming, target that land, purchase the land, then turn around and do the feasibility study to be able to build something on that land, you will be ready when we take care of boundaries and everything else to be able to launch and build a high school. And that should be part of a 10-year plan for AISD, because within 10 years, you're going to need to have that school constructed, especially if the growth continues the way it is in Austin, particularly South Austin. But right now, we know that we can manage, and we have figured out the first 4 to 5 years, but it's after that we have to really be able to nail the future for another South High School.
Okay, we need to get that done. My daughters are no longer going here, but they did go to Bowie High School and took classes in broom closets. I kid you not. And we need the relief down here.
I understand.
It's been 5 years since we approved that money. You weren't here at the time, I'll give you that, but you've been here for a number of years now. We need to get moving on, because to me, this is a credibility issue with AISD. Thank you.
Oh, the teacher, the auxiliary staff. So auxiliary staff will be people like your custodians. It'll be people like your, help me with other support staff.
Transportation workers,
thank you.
Aides, some of our teacher aides that assist at the auxiliary level.
No, they're listed separate. That's what I was saying. Auxiliary staff are what we call the support staff, right? So it's all those elements of what we do. And I probably just need my own page, so I stopped borrowing yours. Sorry, thank you. So what she's talking about is on page 29. It says teachers, auxiliary staff, educational aides, professional
those are
support.
our transportation workers, our food service workers, some of our custodians. Those would be our auxiliary staff that support sort of our operating foundations at the campus level. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
Think like
yes.
Like real support pieces that aren't quote unquote educators.
Correct. They're not teachers. They're not part of the administration. They're just auxiliary.
They're not like that's what I said. Educators. Like they're not doing an educational function for teaching and learning. If you'd like a comment card, could you please raise your hand so we make sure you get one so we can survey your comments? Great. Good night. Thanks for coming out. Have safe travels.